Jordan. I'm with CBDRx. We're an organic hemp farm. We specialize in cannabinoid farming and high cannabinoid farming. You're here at the State of the CBD address. We'll continue getting people in here and getting going. We have a really good panel here of experts to answer questions and to give you guys the general outlook of what's happening nationally with CBD and what's happening as far as regulatory actions and stuff like that. So without further ado, I know you guys probably have a lot of questions. I'm going to let folks introduce themselves, starting with Mr. Clarke here.
Good afternoon. I want to thank our hosts today, Preston. Everybody who's made this happen. All his people working, and haven't met them all, but it's working out really well so far. Excellent. My name's Rob Clarke. I'm an expat. I've lived in the Netherlands for nearly 30 years, worked for a number of European companies, and worked a lot around Europe and Asia. So I'm an American, but I'm not really versed on the American scene at the moment. But I can talk to you a lot about CBD and how it plays in on the world picture, let's say. Yeah, and I'm an ethnobotanist by training, so for me it's all about the human-cannabis relationship. That's what drives my life, and this is just another aspect of it. So here we go.
Hey, I'm David Bonvillain. I run Elite Cannabis, Elite Botanicals, and now Loveland Molecular Laboratories. We're CBD hemp farmers and have been, honestly, since 2013, before the hemp laws were legal. We were growing high CBD cannabis strains, and then as the evolution of the laws came, those became hemp plants, at least by name. And we focus on a handful of large manufacturing accounts with Mary's Medicinals, Chiba Chews, and Incredibles chocolates. And then we have a laboratory that does processing for all of our own farms, as well as third-party toll processing, basically, like they use in the marijuana industry for other hemp farmers and cannabinoid farmers in the area.
My name is Rick Trojan with Colorado Cultivars and Moonrise Extracts. We are hemp farmers as well, high CBD, cold temperature ethanol extraction. We have our own retail line called Moonrise Extracts, and then we wholesale CBD as well, and also offer CBD processing as a service. Our farmers out in Eaton, Colorado, we had over 300 acres last year. We're looking to do about 5 times that this year.
My name's Josh Hendrix. I'm from Kentucky. I'm a licensed hemp farmer there. I'm by no means an expert in anything in this field, but I'm currently the Director of Business Development for CV Sciences, formerly Cannabis. We have the Plus CBD product line in about 625 stores now, and a bunch of medical practitioners. My job, however, is to figure out how we can start sourcing our material domestically in Kentucky, just because that's where I live, and political climate's obviously pretty good there. There's going to be about 4,500 acres grown in Kentucky this year, but certainly not limited to that. We just want to be able to put U.S. hemp into our products. So if you have U.S. hemp that you want to get into our products, let me know.
Hi, I'm Janel Ralph with Palmetto Synergistic Research. We produce and manufacture a high CBD oil called Palmetto Harmony. First and foremost, though, I'm a mother with a very special child who has intractable epilepsy, who, thanks to the high CBD oils that we produce, has gotten a 90% reduction in seizures, and we've been able to remove 80% of our pharmaceutical meds. So we have, speaking of Kentucky, we have subcontracted growers in Kentucky that grow Palmetto Harmony for us, and we also have subcontracted growers here in Colorado that grow our vape line of products, Palmetto Aura. And I think we're in about 440 storefronts right now.
Okay, so there you guys met our panel of experts up here, a really good crew to bounce questions off of. So I'm going to jump right into it with the first questions as far as, you know, the state of CBD nationally. A lot of stuff's been issued recently as far as supplementation, derivatives from the FDA. And I just want to touch on with our panel and to start the conversation that way. Can you guys, maybe start with Mr. Clarke, would you mind giving me just the general landscape view?
Yeah, well, I'm not a business person. I'm a botanist. So what I see going on at the moment is a bit cart before the horse. I very much hear what you say about your child, and I hear this all the time, and obviously cannabis produces good medicines, but we need proof of this. So what I'm always going to call for is scientific backing for the anecdotal research that we have. And until we can get this, it's hard for me to consider cannabis a viable medicine. So a bit I'm the naysayer, but remember I'm the scientist, and I don't believe in fairy tales. So we need proof for what we already feel in our hearts. That's what I'm saying. And that's the landscape as I see it. About the legal side of things here, it's state by state, it's gray area to me, and it's interesting to watch everybody's different approaches. But yeah.
How about the
good luck
question?
to everybody.
Sorry, Mr. Clarke. How about the recent FDA letters to folks and stuff like that? Would anyone of you guys like to comment on that, Mr. Butt?
I mean, I'm sure some other folks will too. I mean, I think, I'll echo what Rob was saying too. I mean, from a research perspective, that's part of why I originally got into this. And unfortunately, research is it's a tough road to haul, especially on CBD products that you can't necessarily patent. It requires a significant amount of capital outlay, and there's very few investors that are willing to go down those paths unless there's significant monetary gains on the back end. So that's just a challenge overall. I would say, from the FDA perspective, them throwing out an investigational new drug classification is an interesting angle. Given that there was certainly CBD, I mean, I know that there was folks in California making CBD products and selling those products long before GW got, the patent for that, granted by the FDA. So I think there's an interesting level of scare tactic going on of where they're not exactly saying, that you can't do this. They're saying that you have to prove that what we're saying is wrong in order to continue to justify what you're doing, or you have to reclassify the product. So I know that there's a handful of companies that have reclassified what they call their product. There was almost immediately a name change that happened across Amazon. If you guys saw, Amazon did a big sweep of getting all the CBD products off, and then a handful of them popped back on as concentrated hemp oil, which just starts getting into a weird nomenclature game with what do they say you can call it, and what are we going to try and call it to be able to then get it out into people's hands. And that's ultimately the consumer loses in those situations, and I think that sucks.
For us, it's one of those things. It's all about communication, proper communication. Obviously, we avoid making any claims as much as we can. Obviously, we don't, but as much as our clients that carry our products and sell our products do, there's a point of control that we lose at some point along the line. So, it's one of those things for me. You can't believe everything you read out there, especially on Facebook and Twitter and all that good stuff. But there's a lot of good people doing a lot of good work with this, and just professionalism and moving that forward in a professional manner with proper communications, I think, is probably key to what we're doing.
Absolutely. Just research needs to lead the way. We need to take Mr. Clarke's skepticism about the efficacy of CBD and the efficacy and really prove that to the general landscape, so we can move on as an industry. Janel, did you have something?
Yeah, I will touch on the gentleman that I'm sorry, what was your name?
Mr. Clarke.
Clarke. Okay. We actually have a pediatric neurologist that's been doing a food medicine trial on Palmetto Harmony the last 8 months, and what he's seen with intractable epilepsy is pretty phenomenal. But there's a lot of quantitative data out there. My daughter does a QEEG. We do one about every 3 months. She's been on Palmetto Harmony about a year now, and her EEG quantitatively has improved. I mean, that is happening across the country, whether it's my brand, your brand, somebody else's. So it is quantitative evidence. It's out there. We just have to be able to access it.
That's exactly
yes,
right.
Absolutely.
From quantitative evidence, we need to step into the clinical trial and pilot programs.
So
let's jump into questions. We're going to go ahead, Rick. Go ahead.
I was just saying, we've done one set of clinical trials. We're doing another set of clinical trials coming up. But to your point, David, I think you can't patent it. It's not a chemical that you can make the exact same every single time. Plants change, their profiles change, their terpene profiles, cannabinoid profiles can change depending on weather and conditions. So it's tough. While we do need to get the scientific backing of the botanical extract, it's tough to always have the consistency. Without consistency, it's tough then to find final results, right? So science is all based on this versus your control, and sometimes if what you're testing varies from time to time, that's going to create issues on the scientific in the clinical trials of things, and that's what we're finding. But even just the clinical trials we're doing, the stuff that you guys are doing, Janelle's doing, I think it just helps to add support and evidence to what this plant can do.
Absolutely.
Let me just chime in real quick on
absolutely.
that one too. There is a push behind the research side where we're actually started a project with CSU's vet school recently, and it was privately funded. The school basically went ahead and took a risk because officially they should get their own research plot and they should license it this way. And we talked to Dwayne, and Dwayne was like, well, this is a deviation from the way that we're licensing these days, but we'll do whatever it takes to make sure that this kind of thing continues to occur. So I thought it was really cool that CSU went ahead and stuck their neck out a little bit to make sure that they had it was locally produced CBD in for we don't get any recognition for it, but I didn't really care. I just thought it was awesome that we get to do it, right? And absolutely. And you have a university level research study that's really going on that's not, backed by with somebody else's, unique interest in mind. It was truly an efficacy and, whether people should be pumping their pets full of CBD all the time.
That's leading the way right now. I mean, like David said, CSU, Colorado University, Adams State University are all coming on board and really adopting research programs. Absolutely. As this industry gains national attention and as more and more states come on board for hemp farming, the federal landscape is only pushing that way. So I know you guys got a lot of questions, everybody here, about CBD. You guys want to throw some at our panel here? Let's go back. Phil Donahue.
I just want to say, I feel like there's already been a lot of research done with CBD. I mean, a lot of published studies. The U.S. government already has a patent on, I'm sure everybody knows, on the, treatment and prevention of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. I mean, I feel like a lot of this research has been done. What can we do to, prevent big pharma, from coming in and taking it and not, preventing us from being able to, provide patients with the medicine they need, I guess, the way we're doing it versus, big pharma. I mean, I feel like the research has been done. What can we do to, get the FDA off our backs and kind of move forward?
Well, I would argue that there hasn't been enough research done. There's been enough research done to get a patent, but not enough research to apply that patent to giving medicines to humans. There's another big difference, and I'm hearing about studies going on with veterinary and human both. This is great. But whether these studies will be recognized by the FDA and the American Medical Association is another question. My advice to you of trying to avoid big pharma is to stop calling it medicine. That's the way to get around big pharma. Stop going into their front yard and pooping in it. Just leave them alone, and call it food, nutritional supplement, healthcare product. Leave the decision about medical use up to the user, to the mothers in this room. Okay? They're the only ones who should decide what it is. Not our government, not big pharma. So don't get in their faces. That's my advice. Take another approach.
Thanks, Doug.
Yeah, along those lines, I think big pharma's here. They're already here and they're coming, and I think trying to fight them is futile, right? But I think, to your point, Mr. Clarke, I think calling it a dietary supplement, right? So I was sick a couple weeks ago, and rather than take pharmaceutical drugs, I handled it with all natural supplements or all natural oils, essential oils, and that was able to get me through, which was fantastic. We as consumers have the ability to stop big pharma from coming in by not buying big pharma anymore, by talking to our doctors and saying, is there an alternative? And this is, doctors need to get educated as well. Traditional Western doctors need to get educated as well. There are more than one ways to cure a problem or one way to combat or deal with a symptom, right? And so we can make the decision about big pharma by what we purchase, and we on the industry side can make decisions to create something and not call it a medicine, call it a supplement or a food additive or whatever we want to call it. And then you as consumers have the choice to do you take the big pharma option or do you take the holistic option? That's going to be up to everyone. But I think as a country, we need to have those options, and we are now starting to have them again, but we need to have more of those options available.
Absolutely. Well said, Rick.
I've been in the Fort Collins community practicing massage therapy for 33 years, and the last year, everyone's bringing in their creams. So I'm curious, am I at any risk transdermally by the end of the day if the sourcing is unclear as to where the product is coming from and the hemp and the, all of that? Do I have to start wearing gloves? I mean, I'm really curious because, it wouldn't be a way to end my career.
So I'm not a doctor, obviously, but I think our skin is the largest organ in our body, right? It absorbs most everything goes through the skin. Definitely, I would be cognizant of where that's coming from. Again, that comes into knowing your supplier, knowing where you're getting it from, knowing what you're buying, which comes into labeling, accurate labeling and such. But I think, if there was a study done, a lot of stuff coming from overseas had heavy metals or leads or arsenic in it, so that would be harmful to you, I would imagine, right? Using it every day on your hands. But I'm not a doctor, I can't speak to it, but definitely know where it comes from. If it comes from an organic source, obviously that's helpful. If it comes from someone that you know or a supplier that you trust, that's important. But I would definitely figure out where it's coming from if you're applying it to your skin all day, right?
Yeah, so if you're dealing with like customers just bringing in random products, you certainly have some inherent risk because there could be a bunch of pesticides and whatever sprayed on things. Did they use DMSO in their... That's the acronym, right? DMSO, the stuff that just makes anything go through your skin. Yeah, I mean, if that's what they're using as a transdermal agent, that could be risky. So, I mean, but the woman that just replied was right. I mean, if it was from the marijuana market or an actual product that's put onto retail shelves, I mean, I know that you guys, I mean, everybody lists what was in there and what the sources of things are from. If it's a random white bottle full of stuff, I probably would wear gloves.
Got a good question here from the last week. The National Institutes of Health did their overview on cannabinoids. We have some good questions about it.
So during the conference with the neuroscience conference at the NIH last week, they doctor to doctor were complaining about the path of doing the studies because of the Schedule 1 designation, and so I'm just trying to figure out how do we do these studies when you have a big brick wall. And also the second thing was that Dr. I can't remember her last name. She was also speaking to the way that everything does get bulked in together when they refer to the cannabis and the cannabinoids rather than specifying THC and CBD and the different receptors that they handle. So I just really think that the first big step is going to be the scheduling.
Actually, it'd be the descheduling, and I think you guys we're seeing it. You're looking at pioneers up here. As this industry gains potential across the country, I mean, the federal government, USDA certified our farm organic, and we're Schedule 1. We're a Schedule 1 farmer right now. And something completely illegal. The U.S. government said, no, it's organic, absolutely. So it takes it's gaining attention nationally. More questions?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Dylan from Kent State. And one question I did want to ask is the relationship between CBDs and cancer. Like I've heard it's prevented from metastasizing or it's actually helped people overcome cancer. What do you guys know about this?
What we know and what we're going to say are two different things.
Wait.
Yeah, I don't know of a doctor yet that will actually. I mean, so Doc Shackelford's a buddy of mine, and he won't, discuss that in any way, shape, or form as far as it actually being effective for treatment of cancer. That being said, cannabinoids have been shown in petri dishes to destroy cancer cells, but there's a lot of things, just from a medical evidence perspective, that has been shown to destroy cancer cells in petri dishes that weren't actually applicable in humans. But anecdotally, I mean, there's a handful of very inspiring stories out there, and I made a batch of very potent suppositories for a cancer patient that passed away before they could get them, but I had so much response from having made them that we just started giving them out to everybody for the same reasons, right? It's generally, a terminal situation. They need an incredibly high dose, or at least based on the same anecdotal evidence, everybody assumes they need 1,000 milligrams per day, and so, whatever way they can get that in. So, I mean, I've been giving out, suppositories like crazy.
There is actually a scientist, Dr. Nagarkoti at USC. I actually just watched a presentation from him the other day, and he's been doing the cancer trials at the University of South Carolina, and he, using high THC, though, a little off topic, but he has come out and said that he will publicly state that cancer can be cured from THC. So, and he's a scientist. He said, "I'm just a scientist. I just report the facts." So you guys might want to, call him up. Nagarkoti at US. Oh gosh, no, can't spell it. At University of South Carolina, he's heading up their research division for cancer and cannabinoids.
Okay, here we go.
A friend of mine sent me an article written by Mike Adams, and he's has a website, Natural Health News, and he was talking about what you talked about in the beginning, where the FDA was classifying anything that has a cannabinoid as a drug, and you can't call it a supplement. And I went to the FDA website, and it does say that anything that has that constituent cannot be considered a supplement. So my question is, and because I was thinking about selling CBD oil on my website and getting into this industry, and then I was scared cold to even venture into it. And there were 8 CBD oil companies that had FDA warning letters written to them recently, and I think the complaint was that they had different levels of constituents than what was stated, but I don't know the details. But my question is this a really risky, the CBD oil very risky, considering their statement about that on the website? Can anyone selling or anyone manufacturing, can they be shut down by the FDA at any time? Is anybody else scared about this? And does anyone have a legal opinion from an attorney about how to proceed or navigate this situation?
Okay, so I think it's very important to understand that some of these companies that had received letters were actually making claims of treating ailments, and their bottles were also grossly mislabeled. So I'm looking at it from a different perspective, thinking that maybe the FDA is doing their job, and maybe that they are sending letters to unreputable companies, trying to get them to come up to the bar. I know that we call our product hemp. We don't call it a dietary supplement. We call it hemp oil. We don't make any claims to treat. We don't put testimonies on our website that can be construed as us saying something. I would suggest leaving a rating up so people in first person can leave their comments, but don't ever put somebody's testimony on your website. And be very bland. I mean, our website is very bland. It says hemp. We don't push the fact of CBD. We don't say it's a dietary supplement. We don't say it's a nutritional supplement. We haven't ran into any problems, so.
Yeah, I think the article you're referring to is the headline was something like FDA outlaws CBD, and he actually had to retract that because it was poorly worded. That's not the case, but that did scare a lot of people. Obviously, there were like she said, companies making claims, something we all obviously don't want to do because we have big companies that don't want to get shut down, and it is certainly a gray area that we operate in, and I think we've all have attorneys that help us operate in that. So I can see why you would be scared, but I think it's a process, and it's probably gonna be figured out in the next little bit here.
Be a pioneer.
Yeah, definitely.
Who's next?
Yeah, I'm from Oregon, and I have a license to grow, and I'm growing 1,000 acres this year. 200 acres are already been accounted for, so I am looking for buyers. I'm also a physician assistant. I've been one for 36 years. I have a DEA license, and I want to comment on 2 things about the Israeli experience, because Israel has all sorts of proven, studied things. They're using 24% pharmaceutical grade in war zones to treat pain. So the medics in Israel, they carry morphine in one pocket and they carry a little bottle of CBD, 24%. And if you haven't broken a bone, they're going to put CBD because then you don't have to carry the guy. And that's how medics get killed in war. They carry people. The other thing is there's a bunch of stuff that I'm interested in because I am, I have 24 years retired military and 3 combat tours. And every medic I know has post-traumatic stress. And my interest is, how does CBD help with post-traumatic stress? The Israelis use it. What do you know about that?
Let's talk about CBD in our body. Really acts as a point of homeostasis. There's only one other phylum of plants in the Cannabinaceae phylum where you have phytocannabinoids. And in Mammalia, we have endocannabinoids, endogenous. There's only one relation right there where you can have that taken from a natural product from the earth and have it go into your body and work effectively with homeostasis. I think a lot of that is with guys with post-traumatic stress, there's so many obstacles to deal with. But homeostasis in a small amount can help so many of those other obstacles. So, CBD in general, cannabinoids in general, huge benefit for, in generally. But for post-traumatic stress, I can only imagine it would help folks.
I couldn't honestly answer that on PTSD. That was a good answer. But I try and honestly, this is a kind of an issue with this industry overall. Like we said, we're not doctors, right? And I try and not pretend like I'm one on television just because I happen to farm, a cannabinoid that's very useful for a lot of medical conditions. So I have friends that are doctors, and I generally ask them about that kind of stuff.
Kind of along the lines of what the gentleman up in the front said. I was just at the Canatech conference in Israel, the Cannabis Innovation Summit. They had a number of physicians and doctors that were on panels there talking about the fact that they're administering cannabis to patients with PTSD and with a number of other ailments throughout the Israeli medical system. Any company like the ones represented here can pay $5,000 a patient and go and have a clinical trial conducted in Israel with pharmaceutical-grade CBD and THC and other cannabinoids. The only problem with that is, of course, bringing it back and taking it through the FDA process and actually getting it approved here. But to the scientist's point that said that we need more research, absolutely we do, but there's been 36 clinical placebo-controlled studies on cannabis dating back to the 1970s in Brazil with epilepsy based on Meshulam's research in Israel. They were able to find in 1970 that CBD decreased seizures. So my question is, why don't we focus on those international partnerships? There's Spanish scientists doing similar work, people in New Zealand, Israel. Why don't we start funding trials there and taking that research and bringing it back here?
Boris, I think that's a great point. I think that's a great idea. Excuse me, because it's made here and it's produced here, it's gonna fall under our legal infrastructure, and so that's a great point, and that provides evidence for the application here within our country. I think, unfortunately, the way the regulations and laws are set up, we're unable to use that. Right? We're unable to say otherwise. I think we'd be a lot farther along if we could take that and use that. We can probably submit that anecdotally, and we're not applying for a drug or FDA or any of that. But so I think what other countries have done, we kind of consider ourselves elitists in a lot of ways. And when it comes to this in particular, it needs to go through the FDA regulatory process. And to the woman's point before, until it gets descheduled, it's going to be very difficult to do that.
I would just add to that too that so I've worked with several groups out of Israel that were trying to fund these types of things, or at least trying to get these kind of things going, and I think a lot of it comes down to money, right? It's both the capital outlay up front, even though the case in point, it was relatively cheap to get a study started. Actually finishing it and getting all of the doctors and all the collaborators together, it does cost cash. And really, at the end of that game, you can't protect all of that information as your own. You release the research to the public, and that's what research does, right? And so really, you're playing off of brand identity. Like, the only real game to play, and I've gone through this with several companies over there, is that, okay, we're the guys that did the research. We were willing to take the risk, so you should buy our product instead of X, Y, or Z that can use the exact same material and produce exactly the same product. There's no restrictions that stop them from doing it. So most of the companies that I've been talking to, or that I've avoided talking to, I guess, at the end of the day, is their real goal was to come over here and get some high-name growers and some high-name doctors that they could show that they were going to be doing research, and then they flipped the pink sheets, right? I mean, their only real game was to go out and say, because the Israeli Stock Exchange will actually allow you to play some of those games, so you can come out with something that's just a really good idea that has a cast of characters that are like the Robert Clarks or the Dr. Shacklefords or the whatever, and then they can just do that and turn it into money and then take their money and run, and nobody ever actually gets any research done, right? And so there's it's a delta between, you know, the people that actually would be the philanthropists that would fund this, and then what can they do with it on the back end? Because otherwise, if it's all just to make people feel better, that's a rare, finite amount of people with enough capital to make it happen.
Absolutely.
Doing studies overseas makes a lot of sense. You can it's about $10,000 per patient to start a clinical study here. But is it applicable to our system? That's the big question. And we have all this research that's just been pointed out. It's absolutely true, and none of it's recognized here. And that's still what we're fighting against. I met a mammalian physiologist yesterday at University of Colorado Boulder. She's been working for 2 years trying to get CBD to run trials. It's a Schedule I drug. She's a federal employee. Bang. She's shot down. They have the university lawyers. They have everybody working on trying to do this. It's a straight-up project. That these other clinical trials are going on, that's cool. That's what you're calling them. That's not what anybody else is going to call them. These are N of 1 experiments primarily. You can't send one person to Israel. You need to send a statistically significant number of people to Israel, times 5,000 each. You know, it starts to add up, you know, and is it applicable? That's really the question.
I'm John Long with the hemp co-op here in Colorado. We're growing a lot of hemp too, and you know, I think with all the, you know, as late as we are to the game compared to the rest of the world, a lot of acres are going to be popping up. You know, 1,000 acres in Oregon, thousands of acres in Kentucky. Same with Colorado. Where do you guys see the price point settling? Because obviously CBD prices have crashed already and are crashing as we speak. Where do you think it's going to settle out?
I'd like to see it on Whole Foods Market for $20 so everybody can access it.
$20 what? Can you clarify that, Janelle? $20. What are you saying? $20.
I mean, realistically, that's my goal. My goal is to be able to offer this at an affordable price to everybody, and if that's driving the market down, then we're going to do it. I mean, I'm telling you, this needs to be on Whole Foods markets across this country at an affordable price for everybody.
Well, we're at 10
just
cents.
$20.
10 cents a milligram. You know, retail is probably the lowest you'll find. That's what we're selling our oil at. 10 cents a milligram. That's just coconut oil.
My
alcohol.
final product's 8 cents a milligram.
It's 7 now.
I'm working it.
You guys, we're getting tight here. We're getting tight on our time. Let's get
to answer real quick though, something that's going to have to happen is this is going to have to become a commodity or an agricultural commodity, and then you're going to look at it just like you do turmeric and fish oil and all that stuff, and the price is definitely going to come down because we work with real farmers, and when they hear some of these crazy numbers, they're, you know, dollar signs in their eyeballs. But the reality is that's going to have to level off at some point. So if we can get it to where farmers are making somewhere in the range of what they used to make with tobacco, obviously higher than grain prices, but not $100,000 an acre. So, yeah.
So yeah, wine grapes at $3,000 an acre is kind of a high-end, you know, crop. So I mean, you know, they're looking at $350 an acre for non-cannabinoid hemp up in Canada. So I mean, my guess is somewhere, you know, in between that, because I mean, wine grapes are kind of a pain in the ass too. And for the guy that's growing a Sinsemilla crop and going through everything that takes, whether it's from soft tissue cuttings or propagating from tissue or whatever, I mean, all of those things cost money. So I think the crop will retain a higher value than, you know, than grain, but I don't think we're going to be seeing, you know, 25 to, you know, 150,000 an acre for very long.
I have a comment and a question. Comment was also on the clinical trials thing real quick, is that there is also a difference in what a lot of us are looking at, which are extracts. The worldwide clinical trial market is set up for single molecule testing. And so yes, you can test the cannabidiol isolate and go through official routes. But when you start talking about the oil and all the other constituents, the terpenes, the lesser cannabinoids, clinical trials aren't set up to even do things like that. That's not how they quality control, by looking at 1,000 different substances. They look at one. My question, though, we've mentioned a couple international things, and I just wondered if anyone had comments on the importation of CBD versus the locally sourced. What do you see the market doing on there, and if anyone has any comments on that?
I mean, I'll touch on that because we do import or have been importing our material for years now, and it's a pain in the ass, quite frankly. Just like importing seed or importing anything that's in that gray area, iffy. You're jumping through hoops and hurdles just trying to get it. Our work in Kentucky and with other states that have pilot programs, and our personal thoughts on the current legislation is that if I grow it as a farmer in Kentucky and a Kentucky company extracts it, then it's 100% legal for us to ship that to California and manufacture it into our products. So we're obviously shifting away from that. I don't know, can't speak for any other companies, but I think that you're going to see a downslide in that, and 100% U.S. domestically sourced materials for all the companies.
Brand new industry, brand new something that can bring our economy back.
I want to make one comment for the next question. All this holds water until a company sets up a pre-approved, FDA-approved, pre-approved production line in China. This is how most of the bulk drugs are produced here already. So if you think you're going to get it to a penny a milligram or 10 milligrams for a penny, you'll still be doing pretty good if you can get that at that point, because you're going to get swamped. This is, if it really is the analgesic of the future, if it's the new aspirin that everybody is saying, look out. You don't need Big Pharma to compete. They'll just brand the stuff and sell it under their giant advertising campaigns. This is, they're unavoidable, especially if it's as good as everybody says it is. We're kind of stuck. The people in this room care a lot about buying domestically. We're patriotic people, and we're kind of come from the hippie side, a lot of us, or your parents did at least. So we're conscious about these things. So. But most American consumers really don't give a damn. They want the cheapest, most effective product. And that's going to be the bottom line, no matter what.
I want to apologize in case the question I asked was already addressed. I came in a little late. But it kind of touches on the last question and some of the comments you made. I'm wondering what the panel thinks about grading of CBD, specifically CBD extract. I think when you talk about like the price of CBD crashing and stuff like that, how do y'all feel about the foreign CBD? I see a lot of CBD product that I would really only want to put in topicals, being put into consumable CBD product. Do you think there is an industry level, a collective, grading or arrangement of these products into their, best fit category, where you might be able to say some of the European CBD should only have this market end, and we could keep the price of, the homegrown American, the true whole plant CBD oil, keep those prices up through something like that? Is that possible?
Definitely possible. Something that I know in Kentucky, and we've started to reach out to other groups throughout the country. Something we see as necessary would be a SRO, self-regulatory organization, where we all agree on standardized testing, standardized grading, things along those lines.
Guys, we're timed out. All these folks have booths here. You can come and talk to any of us about cannabinoid farming or CBD, and we'll answer any questions. I'll hang around in the hall if I can help with anyone. But I want to thank you guys all for coming.